But at the same time, it has to be some reciprocity.
True.
Unfortunately, some of our people, not all, some of our people lack professionalism.
Yes.
They think, well, you just have to support me because I'm black. Whether it's a contractor, whether it's a physician, whether it's a real estate agent, whatever it may be, we just have to support me because I'm black. But you're not doing a good job.
Everything black on black. If I studied that facts on facts.
Welcome back to another episode of the Black is the New Rich podcast. And today we got a very special guest. I honestly consider him a thought leader because I was doing research on his content and it presented thought-provoking emotions. So I didn't want to ask him about it while we were conversing through DM. I wanted to bring him on the show so he can explain himself further. But I don't want to keep talking. Can you please introduce yourself?
Wonderful. Thanks, Cory. So my name is David Grant. My background is I'm trained as a social worker. So I have my MSW, so my Master in Social Work. And currently I'm pursuing my PhD studies. So that's my doctorate studies in public health sciences, where I'm focusing on looking at mental health and illness amongst Black people internationally, of course, looking at in the Canadian context, but looking internationally and looking at treatment, assessment, and conceptualization of mental health and illness. So looking at psychiatric disorders and how we conceptualize it and how we can really bring Africa back into the center of how we really address our mental health and wellness in our community. So I do many other things. I write legal reports for the Sentencing Project. I do various independent consultation. I also run my own counseling / psychotherapy business called Global Mind Emancipation. I do provide lectures on respective issues pertaining to African people from economics, mental health and wellness, health in general. So I do a whole bunch of different things, but most importantly, I'm dedicated to seeing African people advance and be the amazing people we've always been. So thank you, Cory.
Amazing. Did you know that the Black dollar leaves the community within 6 minutes? That's why we are excited to introduce the new Black is the New Rich app designed for the Black community to be more intentional about where we spend our dollar. The directory consists of mostly financial services like real estate agents, financial advisors, tax consultants, mortgage agents, videographers, photographers, and many more. With our app, you can easily find and connect with quality services that are owned by Black entrepreneurs. And to ensure the integrity of the service on our app, all directory members are held accountable if they receive multiple bad reviews. Our mission is to circulate the dollar and provide quality services to our community. Download the Black is the New Rich app today and start investing in your community. That's a long resume right there.
Man, thank you.
Congratulations for one. Before we get into what you're doing right now, I want to get into a little bit of the background information.
Sure.
When did this switch happen when you're growing up to be like, I want to take on such issues?
Excellent. So I always tell people I actually didn't want to get into social work.
Really?
Which is crazy. Because now I couldn't see myself outside of it.
Yeah.
I initially wanted to pursue psychology. Why? So I grew up in Scarborough. I grew up in different parts of Scarborough, more so on the north end. So Lamoureux and, Milliken, so near Alton Towers. So,
okay, yeah.
I grew up around there, but I also grew up going to various programming in Malvern, in Galloway, in Chesterley. Yeah. So I guess you could say I'm a true Scarborough man, right? And growing up there, Scarborough, we know, is, predominantly Black, brown, yellow. So Jamaican, Sri Lankan, East Asian, specifically Chinese. And growing up there, you see the tight-knit communities, manifesting itself, and which is beautiful. But at the same time, I'd see a lot of conflict, sometimes intercultural, but intracultural as well. So with our respective African diaspora communities, right? And seeing this stuff, I also seeing it in my family, not only the conflict, but seeing the homelessness, seeing the people talking to themselves, seeing people with very low mood, seeing people who are always angry and all these different things. It really brought these questions of why this is occurring. But then what also brought questions to my mind was, why is this being neglected? You go into the schools and I would see a lot of my homies engaging in being very angry and clearly distressed. I know the home backgrounds they come from. Yeah. No teacher cared. Yeah. No school social worker cared. I didn't even know there were school social workers growing up.
Yeah, me neither.
Because I didn't see them. I knew about the school psychologists because they always diagnosed all the Black kids with ADHD and ADD. Yeah. So all of that to say, I had all these questions. I was taking the TTC from the time I was 11. Yeah. You see a lot on the TTC, especially Kennedy Station back in the day and on the subway. My point is, I saw all these issues. And I really want to know what about it, why this was happening. I want to know it from a biological standpoint, but most importantly, a psychological standpoint. And so I really started to, by the time I was 12, I was an avid reader. Started to read a lot of urban literature. So by Sharon Draper, for instance, a lot of Black urban dramas. From there, then my mother had me reading that, the autobiography of Malcolm X.
Yeah.
And, by then I was reading other respective literature, looking at the Black condition, as I would say.
Yeah.
And I started to put pieces together. And so by the time I got into university, my pops said, maybe you should pursue social work because psychology, you have to do your PhD. Do you really want to do that now? I'm like, I'm not sure. Decided to pursue social work, which gave me a more widespread understanding of the intersection between social issues and psychological issues and anthropological, which is the study of cultures, issues, as well as some bit of biological understandings. And it was then that I started to actually hone in on really starting to see, okay, how do white people understand these issues?
Yeah.
Once I was able to get a thorough understanding of that, then I was able to critique it, right? Because now it's like, okay, I know this doesn't apply to my people, but I have to first understand because they're the mainstream theories.
Yeah.
But then if anybody who went to school with me knows every paper that I wrote, every essay that I completed was on understanding different components of Black people internationally. I started with the States because that's what I'm most familiar.
Yes.
There's not much literature in Canada.
Yeah.
But as I gained more knowledge about leadership in Canada or literature in Canada, then I started to look in Canada. Then, of course, my family, we're Jamaican.
Yeah.
So I'm looking in Jamaica, I'm looking in Trinidad. Then I started to, take a more Pan-African standpoint.
Okay.
And it was from there that I really started to hone in on the importance of mental health and wellness. That's where I landed my expertise, my knowledge. So it went right back to my interest back in psychology.
Yes.
But now I had it's
more focused.
More focused. I had more breadth.
Okay.
So then I did my master's and then I did some work in the field that I'll probably talk about later on. But then I knew I need to go deeper and I want to be more expansive.
Okay.
And I knew the PhD could probably help me do that, especially in public health. We know public health, look at COVID, right? And that's how I landed where I'm at. But that was the journey. There's definitely more components.
Yeah.
Both familial wise and such, stuff that I saw in my family, my extended family, but that's the journey.
Okay. Amazing.
Yes.
So on this podcast, it's called Black is the New Rich. So we talk a lot about entrepreneurship and how to, make money in different ways. Of course. Right. But I do believe before that, it starts with our mindset. Right. And that's why I brought you here today, because I want to peel back layers on who we are and how we can progress forward.
Of course.
Right. So I was watching one of your podcasts and you looked in the camera and you said, God is Black. Yeah. How does that make you feel?
Yes.
And it made me feel like, I still can't describe the emotion, but it made me feel something. And I'm like, I have to have him on this podcast.
Thank you.
Right. So why is that necessarily important to, for us to know that God is Black?
Excellent. In the easiest way that I can describe it, when you can see, the highest deity, and I say the highest deity for those who believe in the Abrahamic religions, right? Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and all the other respective ones. Those who are Hindu, for instance,
it's a little different.
It may be a bit different, but specifically, we know, with African people, that is
like the one God.
The systems. One God, the monotheistic. I think it's monotheistic or monotheistic framework. When you can't see yourself, meaning how you look, your skin color, in the most highest deity and any other prophet or servant of the Most High, if you can't see yourself in them, subconsciously you are subjecting yourself to eternal inferiority. So I want to break that down because I know you do. So what I mean by that is, if you can't see yourself reflect, if you don't believe you are reflected in the person or the deity that you honor, and you see them as reflecting another group, what you essentially are saying is that you will eternally always be less than that respective group.
I agree.
So if you are, for instance, we look in Christianity as a point of reference, although some could argue some of that even plays out with how we even understand Islam. And and people have minimized African people's role in helping to spread Islam throughout Africa. It wasn't solely the Arabs, right? But looking back at Christianity, that has been one of the most detrimental effects of the perversion of Christianity. I want to say perversion.
What does that mean?
So when I say the perversion, I mean the distortion. I mean the I guess damage done to the actual purity of what was understood as Christianity.
Okay.
So when somebody perverts it, basically they take components of it and they make it grotesque, they make it nasty, and they really twist it in a way that makes it impure.
Okay.
And that's what happened to Christianity.
Okay.
And what happened was basically they took this pure understanding of Christ's teachings, and they made Christ white. They made God white. They made the disciples white. They made the literature to correlate with maintaining this notion of white superiority. And then they gave it back to African people. And then they said, this is our religion and this is what you should be following. And so African people essentially were following a white God.
Yes.
Who had all these commandments to uphold white power.
Yeah.
And although in the church they will say, oh, well, we don't see color. Then why are all the peoples and the paintings in the church white? Because what that does is it tells you subconsciously, and I say subconsciously, matter of fact, even unconsciously, unconscious and subconscious, the difference is unconscious is you're not aware at all.
Okay.
It's an automatic process.
Yeah.
Right. So like, for instance, when you're driving on the highway and then you just take the exit, you're like, oh shoot, that's your unconscious mentality working. Yeah. Right. Because it's remembering that stored information and pulling on it and say, oh yeah, you turn here, and you didn't have to be consciously aware of that to activate it.
Okay.
The subconscious is like in the middle where you're somewhat aware, but you're not fully aware of certain things that you're doing. So why I say the subconscious is what it does is it's telling people that Black people are naturally inferior to white people because white people epitomize God. Especially if you have these paintings. You may not fully believe that consciously.
Yeah.
But then when a white person said, you see how pastors move differently.
Exactly.
When you see what movies or films that they show to the children, it's always these white portrayals of Jesus.
Yeah.
So all of that to say, when we understand that, in order to reverse that, we have to go to the other extreme of seeing God as us. And people, again, argue against it. And I say, no problem. Then we can stop saying God is white.
Okay. Exactly.
That's all I'm saying.
Fair.
So fine. God is not Black, no problem. Then God doesn't have a color.
Yeah.
But it can't be God is Black, but you don't argue when I say God is white.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what I'm saying. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for the people that say, okay, so we've made it this far, right?
Yeah.
Why is our history still important? What do you have to say about that? The importance of history.
If you don't know where you've been, then you won't know where you're going.
Okay.
Maya Angelou, she quoted that if you don't know where you've been, then you have no idea where you're going. You don't know where you are currently, and then you don't know where you're going. Why is history so important? Because we're the only people on the planet whose histories
It's erased.
have been, I wouldn't even say it's erased because you could see various scholars digging up the history. It's been buried.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Parts of it have been erased. So you're definitely partially correct. Parts of it have been erased. So, for instance, the burning down of respective libraries and, the burning of manuscripts that our respective scholars back in the day wrote. Because we did have a written language, by the way, in West Africa, in North Africa. And so there is part of that occurring, but at the same time, it's been buried. And the problem is when you have no history, what's your foundation? What are you rooting your stuff in? And unfortunately, if you just root your stuff in slavery, well, essentially you're the youngest people on the planet, right? Because we've been enslaved since essentially the 1600s, technically the early 1500s, or the late 1500s, I should say. But the point is if your history starts in slavery, you're the youngest people on the planet. You're underdeveloped because slavery, it's not like we were allowed to engage in our higher self.
Yeah.
We were engaged in survival, right? We were dehumanized legally, politically. Yeah. So all of that to say, we have to understand we did have a history. It's not about making it up. Yeah. We're not blackwashing history. There was a history. A lot of inventions by Europeans were actually influenced by African genius.
Yeah.
So until we understand that, we have no point of reference. So anytime someone says history doesn't matter, I ask, well, what are you basing your things on? And usually as you start to tease out what they're saying, it's based off of some European paradigm.
Yeah.
Or some enslavement paradigm, which is a very distorted and ill-founded paradigm that is, I mean, it's rooted in parcel from our African cultures. But my point is it's not fully grounded in who we are as people. Yeah. We're unscathed by enslavement, if that makes sense.
Because lately, as I get older, I started to think about Black History Month, what it was about when I was growing up.
Yes.
And the starting point, as far as I can remember, started in slavery.
Yes.
And I feel like now growing up, that's a little bit problematic to show our kids and our young ones that, hey, this is where you started.
Yes.
What do you think about that? You think?
Yeah, it's 100% problematic. Now, we don't want to go to the extreme of saying we don't want to talk about slavery.
Yes.
You know what I
agree.
Right? Which you and I both know. But at the same time, it's putting slavery into context.
Yes.
Slavery was a disruption in our history.
Yes.
It is unfortunately a part of our history because we have to talk about the disruptions.
Yeah.
But is it our history? You see, language is very important. Is it our history? No. It disrupted it. So people would ask, okay, who were we before enslavement? Well, that can't be answered in one sentence. That can't even be answered in one conversation because we were such a dynamic people. And I think when we start to understand that we had empires like the Songhai Empire, like the Akan people, like the Kingdom of Mali, like the Timbuktu Library, and all these different aspect, the Kingdom of Congo, the Dahomey Kingdom we see in Woman King. When you start to understand we had kingdoms, and we didn't just have royalty, we had different tiers of a system. We had a whole system. We had those who worked in the village who were self-sustaining. They were the definition of entrepreneurs, right?
Functioning civilization.
Functioning civilizations. When we start to understand that, then we can understand that, we as African people actually did have identities with an S before Europeans came and took those away and gave us new ones. True. So we don't take away slavery. We don't take away understanding it because we need to understand where our dysfunction comes from.
Exactly.
But we don't say that is the starting point.
Yes.
We have to go back.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say to that.
Okay, cool. So I know when I was doing my research, I know you fight against self-hatred.
Yes.
Right? And I remember watching another podcast and I forgot, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was an article that you brought up that.
Yes.
That someone didn't want to be Black.
Yeah, it was a client of a mentor of mine. It was it was a client/patient who, it was a young Black youth, and basically she remembers, and she wrote in the article, it was in the Toronto Life, Don Alexander, and it was, I think, basically it was talking about the after effects, the residual effects of George Floyd. Yeah. So people can check it out, Toronto Life, Don Alexander. And basically it was a Black youth who she said she has some Black youth who have come to her and said, I don't even want to be Black. So that's the context of what had happened.
So I think that's an honest and bold statement that person felt, and I'm happy that they got to even express that. Yeah. But for the people that may feel that and don't express that, how can we help those types of people? Because I feel like you can see it in the way they live their lives, or the choices that they make. Like, for example, for the men or women, Black men or women that say, I would never date a Black man, or I'd never date a Black woman. So those are types of, to me, in my opinion, self-hatred. Yeah, 100%. Right? So how do we combat that, or how do we even go about that?
You have to, a great question, Cory. You have to come about it first and foremost with compassion.
Yes.
I think that sometimes what our people, especially as we start to wake up, we get so angry, and we should get angry, right? Yeah. We should get angry. But we have to understand that they came to that place more than likely from a place of pain, right? They didn't come there overnight. And in order to help them move past that, you have to come with compassion. Because oftentimes what I would see is, in order to try to refute that, other people will come back with the aggression and say, no, what are you talking about? That's self-hatred. And understand, but people, when they're saying those things, they don't believe they hate themselves.
Yeah,
They don't
exactly.
believe it's self-hatred.
Exactly.
They think it's natural. They unfortunately, and this is the whole notion of internalized racism, they have internalized the hierarchy that white people have created, that white people are at the top of the pyramid.
Yeah.
African people are at the utmost bottom.
Yeah.
Right? They have internalized that and truly believe, until we help reverse that illness, as I call it, it's a disease, right? It's not just a behavior, because as we know, certain behaviors that unfortunately almost become stuck, where that person doesn't see that it's a detriment, that they actually don't see the devastating, consequences that it's causing. That's typically when we say that's some form of pathology. That's an illness. They're unwell. You don't come at it with aggression, right? You first have to help them understand their condition. And how do you understand that? You ask questions. Oh, really? Why wouldn't you date a black man? What about a black man is so unworthy of dating? Why wouldn't you date a black woman? What about him, or what about her is so unworthy of dating?
Compassion.
You just want to tease it apart.
Yeah.
And then you see what they say and be like, oh, well, just look at their skin, or look how aggressive they are. You start to hear it out and you're like, oh, okay. And then you ask them, okay, well, who would be more ideal? So you can again start to see where their mind is at. Oh, well, of course, a white woman, or well, white man, they take care of me. Blah, blah, blah. A white woman, they'll hold you down.
Yeah.
You start to say that. And what you do then is you start to really understand how much pain that has come into getting to them to that point. When you start to come about it from a compassionate standpoint, the correction will come later. But I'll have clients come into session, for instance, and they talk nothing but ill against black people.
Yeah.
And then I'll ask them, okay, so what have been your experiences with white people, or your experiences with East Asians or South Asians?
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's crazy. They may think they've had so much. They actually have not had that many. They'll come with, oh, well, when I was in this situation, this white person came through, but this black person didn't. Okay, give me some more. Well, why do you need more? And I'm like, what do you mean? But you see what I mean? They're actually trying to conceal the fact that they're in so much pain when it comes to black people. They have so much animosity and resentment towards black people. Then by default, they drift towards white people, hoping that will help to that will help to diminish the effects of their self-hatred. That maybe if I'm closer to white people, I will actually receive the relief that I'm looking for. They always come up short. Always. Not even once in a while. Always come up short. Compassion, though. You have to allow them. You have to almost lead them by way of allowing them to talk about their experiences. And they'll get to that point. Well, trust me, they'll unveil what's really behind that self-hatred.
Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah.
There's another question that I heard you say, and I just wanted you to break it down. You said, what are we without racism?
Yes.
And what are they without racism?
Yes.
What does that even mean? Because I was like, that's a good question.
You know what? Great question. And it's something that oftentimes come about even, and I'm going to put the challenge out there to some people who are so-called educated, right? When I say so-called educated, have master's degrees, medical degrees, PhDs, etc., where the focus is always, well, this is what has happened to black people. You're right. We need to focus on that. But then I'll say, okay, it goes back to our original point. Well, what were black people before racism came about? And oftentimes there's almost a silence. Oh, well, yeah, we were kings, queen, blah, blah, but David, we're experiencing racism now. Okay, but hold on. Why are you so uncomfortable with going there? It's almost to say that some black people have become accustomed, have normalized this occurrence of racism.
Are they victimizing themselves in a way?
I'm not going to say they're victimizing themselves, because there is some legitimate points. There are real barriers that are present, that we as black people, unfortunately, even if no matter how much we work to, no matter how hard we work, we're always going to come across some of those barriers. A lot of people think, oh yeah, if you just work hard, they come with that meritocracy argument. You can have that, but trust me, there will be some barriers that you'll come across and you'll be like, dang, like I really thought I was going to be able to evade this. But my point is like, in understanding racism, you have to understand yourself as not just being non-white. You have to understand that black people, we as African people, have identities outside of Europeans. And the problem is anytime, let's say, for instance, to give more context to that question, you ask a black person, you correct a black person on something like, you know what, I don't think we should be perpetuating that narrative. That's white people, but we don't do that. Oh, but white people. I'm like, wait, why is your first response? But white people do it. Just because white people do it doesn't mean we have to.
Exactly.
White people have done a lot of things that are absolutely perverted.
Yeah.
We don't have to perpetuate that.
Yeah.
But you'll see it in the responses. I've critiqued, black men in doing certain things. Well, but white people. I don't care about white people.
Yeah. Let's take it for ourselves.
Let's take it for ourselves. My point of reference is African people.
Yes.
My point of reference is, okay, how am I framing my mirrors of, in comparison to how we as African people have always traditionally understood it? Mm-hmm. Now, of course, we have to adapt. We're not back in, the day.
Yes.
But using them as my point of reference.
Yeah.
When you do that, you start to see your trajectory starts to change. But unfortunately, when I come back to the point of what are we outside of racism? Well, what are you outside of a white person? If you don't have white people to compare yourself to, then who are you? Mm-hmm. And that becomes $1 million question that a lot of people struggle to answer because it's almost like there's a fear. They don't want to actually, there's almost that anti-African attitude. They don't want to use African people as their point of reference because they still think ill of African people. So they want to still hold on to this notion that, well, in comparison to the Western education system, well, in comparison to the Western medical system, I don't want to compare to them. Even they have admitted their system is not all that.
Yeah.
So if we understand this is the mainstream system, how have we as African people understood health and remedy and mental health and education and politics and economics? How can we now integrate that into our current system? How can we modify what we're doing currently using that as the point of reference? But a lot of people don't want to go there because they don't think that African people have that capacity. Mm-hmm. So they're saying, well, in comparison to Western, in other words, in understanding this context of racism that I see myself in, I can't see myself outside of that.
Yeah.
That's my point of reference.
Yeah.
So that's what I meant was, can you see yourself outside of racism? And a lot of black people can't. They almost have normalized getting mad at white people for doing what they're doing. Okay, sure. So what happens when we now officially ban it?
Yeah.
What now?
Yeah. Where do we go?
And that ends up being the $1 million question. And then, of course, people will say, oh, but we're not out of it, David. So we can't think there. Well, how do you think we had to get out of slavery? We had to imagine ourselves
being free.
Exactly. You have to start up here.
Exactly.
And then you can progress.
Exactly. And that goes to like one of the basis of this podcast for me, because I wanted to learn. So over the last couple months, I've been studying just how Orthodox Jews move as a community when it comes to their economics.
Yes.
Right. And I came across a YouTube video and he was basically saying, one, they start with moral businesses and businesses that make a lot of money. So for example, a real estate agent, right? And I'll just simplify it. The Jewish real estate agent will always go to the Jewish mortgage broker.
Yes.
And if you have any like home improvements, like tiling or your painting, they'll always go to the Jewish person, right? And what keeps them together is their faith, right? Because they all give, in the Orthodox Jewish community, they give their 10% back to their charities, right? And but their charities support their communities, their schools, which their children go to. So they're bringing up their economy. And they're on like year 3,000. So in no ways am I comparing our let's say the year ones to their 3,000, right? The only trouble I had is, and you can help me break this down, is that I feel like because we're so many different denominations of religion, like the Islam or different sectors of Christianity, it makes it confusing because their foundation is their faith.
Yes.
And our foundation, it looks like it's a little bit all over the place. And in some instances, and this may be a loud opinion, you can help me decipher this, I feel like our churches have robbed us, right? So I'm trying to build like a circular economy within the community by building an app, and that the app has like, for example, like the black mortgage agent, the black real estate agent, but I'm missing that faith component because we're all different.
Yes.
What do you have to say about that?
So excellent. I think that's great that you're trying to create this, I guess, centralized system to help unify, almost like a directory of all the different black businesses to try to keep the money in the community. I think that's important. In terms of what we're missing, I think, with the European Jews, right? The European Jewish people, them using religion as their basis. I mean, the people in the Islam community, especially the Arabs, they do the same thing, right? In the name of Islam, they will unify. But there's a lot of infighting between the respective Arab groups in the Levant region, in North Africa, in the Gulf region. But as you can see, and the same thing with the European Jewish people, the Sephardic Jews, the Ashkenazi Jews. But you're right. They put the differences aside, the petty differences aside. They don't let that divide them. They say, how are we going to keep money within our community so we can all win? And I think with us, to do it off for religion, I mean, it's hard. It's difficult. I mean, Malcolm X tried to do it with Islam, right? But then what Malcolm started to realize, and this is the perspective that I come from, that Marcus Garvey came from, that, a lot of Pan-Africans, W.E.B. Du Bois came from, why don't we use the fact that we're all African? Yes. Right? Okay, that we're all black. Either or. For me, there is no difference, right? I agree. When we use that can be a unifying term. For instance, in Canada, the way we are treated does not differ significantly across the African diaspora. We have tried to divide ourselves. It doesn't work. The Ethiopians have tried and say, oh, no, we're not Jamaican, we're Oromo. So we're different. Y'all are still poor like us. The Somali people came in the 80s and 90s. They tried to say, nah, we separated from the West Africans and the Jamaicans and the Trini people. You guys are just as poor as us. You're just as you're just as poor as us. You're living in the same project buildings as us. The Jamaicans try to say, well, we're not Ghanaian. The Ghanaians say we're not Nigerian. Guess what? Look at Statistics Canada. The poorest group, they didn't say the poorest nationality. They said the poorest group, aside from the indigenous peoples, is black people. If that all grouped together. They didn't say black people from the Caribbean, black people from Africa or East or West. They said black people, those who descend from some part of Africa or the Caribbean. When you start to understand that should tell us, hold on, if there is clearly this unifying oppression, or I should say this homogeneous oppression. What does that mean? Sorry. Homogeneous, very good. Basically the same. Heterogeneous is different. Homogeneous is the same. So if there's this homogeneous oppression, meaning there's one form of oppression, and it is anti-African / anti-black, that is detrimenting all of us. Sure, in nuanced way, but I don't lose sleep over petty differences. Why can't we use that to unify? Okay, so that could be the unifying point. Yes, you know what I mean? And people can say the skin color, or people can say the heritage, and or both. Either or. It's in us. And I think if we start to use that, then we'll start to see that that can actually propel us forward. Because to be honest, when you look, even our respective communities, as much as we want to say we're so different, a lot of our businesses, whether it's the Ghanaian, Nigerian, Jamaican, Somali, a lot of it are actually quite similar. Food, aesthetics. I mean, some are getting into real estate. You have some of us who are getting into tech and everything, but the majority is food, aesthetics, anything cultural related. And in some cases, social service related. How many of us are pharmacists? How many of us are lawyers? I heard you just talk about that. How many of us are physicians? How many of us have specific knowledge in the psychiatric realm? How many of us are psychiatrists, social workers with that specialty, psychologists, etc., right? Nutritionists. You see what I'm saying? So we want to basically promote our cultures, but we don't want to promote our basic necessities. So great, you know where to get the finest fabrics. What happens when your leg's no longer working? You got to go to a Jewish doctor. You got to go to a Chinese doctor. You got to go to we have some doctors in our respective communities coming up, but not even comparison to what we should for what they have and what we need. You see what I'm saying? So I guess to your point, the European Jews use religion. We may not be able to use religion because we've had a complicated relationship with religion. So in understanding that, it'll create too much turmoil. I mean, look in the US, right? You have the Hebrew Israelites. You have the Nation of Islam. You have Christian, but you don't have just Christian. You have the Baptist. You have, Pentecostal. Oh my gosh. Too much. Just stick with either skin color, African heritage. African heritage. There's no more debate. Because, and understanding that we're all oppressed in the same way, it just may be nuanced differently. I think that's not significantly different, but I think that's where we can start to unify. So it's Pan-Africanism. That's why I noted all those respective peoples: Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, W. Du Bois. Oh my gosh, George Padmore. All those brothers were from the Caribbean. Frantz Fanon, he's Caribbean.
Yeah.
Malcolm X, he's technically Grenadian, but he's from the States. Marcus Garvey, he's Jamaican. And there's even Kwame Nkrumah, he's Ghanaian. They're all from different parts of the world.
Same story, same message.
Same message, Pan-Africanism. If we as African, if one of us African people doesn't win, all of us don't win.
Exactly.
Pan-Africanism, in my opinion, is the solution. We just have to systemize it. I think that is what's missing.
What do you mean by systemize it?
So when I say systemize it, I think as a philosophy, as an ideology or ideological or philosophical system in terms of understanding why it's important. So the ideas to structure what is Pan-Africanism, which is understanding pan meaning, across. So trying to unify all people of African descent. It's remained as an idea, as a theory.
Okay.
When I say systemize, okay, well, what would that look like systematically?
Exactly.
How are we going to pull our stuff together? Well, what happens when we differ in cultural nuances? Okay, well, maybe we should find a commonality amongst us. So for instance, we all speak respective different languages.
Yeah.
Some speak a French Creole, some speak an English-based Creole, some speak different African dialects. What if we all learn Swahili? Swahili is one of the most widely used languages throughout Africa.
Yeah.
Why don't we all learn Swahili?
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like the European Jewish people, they all learn Yiddish.
Yeah.
Right? It was a unifying language. So that's an example of systematically systemizing Pan-Africanism.
Yeah.
Okay, we're all going to learn Swahili. I don't care if you're in the Caribbean. I don't care if you're in South America. You can learn your respective dialects, but we need to learn Swahili so we can communicate together.
Yes.
Why don't we create a centralized bank?
Yeah.
So we have one in the Caribbean, we have one in South America, we have one in Africa, and all of it is feeding one another. Systemize it. So when we have those different components, now we're taking that philosophy that of if one of us African people don't win, all of us don't win, and we're actually putting it into systematic practices to try to unify in some capacity.
Exactly.
So that's what I mean by systemize.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
And I heard you say, use the term, we have high self-esteem and low group self-esteem. Was that
yes,
it?
It was I think it was either myself or my co-host Carl.
Yes.
It's very, I guess you can have, and I think I challenged it where some people may think they have high individual self-esteem, but then they at the detriment of low group esteem.
Yeah, and I feel like that's what's going on in our community. What do you?
Yeah, basically it's grounded in individualism versus collectivism.
Exactly.
Right? You have a lot of Black people who may think superficially, no, I'm doing quite well for myself.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's related to material possessions.
Yes.
I'm doing well for myself. I have a nice car, I have a nice job. I
make this.
Yeah, I make this. Yeah. I'm married to this person. I live here, right? Whatever, right? And that's individual.
Yeah.
But then group esteem is very low still because the group esteem is still feeling very dejected. It's still very low. It's not progressing in the way that it should. There's a lot of chronic mistrust occurring amongst one another. Yeah. So a lot of inter is between.
Okay.
Intra is insular. Okay. So intra group meaning within the Black community.
Yes.
Right? And so one could say it's interpersonal, like between you and I. But for me, I call it intra because it's within the Black community in comparison to inter of the Black community against other groups, right?
Okay.
So that's what I mean by intra versus inter. And so there may be intra-conflict or intra-group conflict, but somebody who's individualist will say, that's not my problem. I'm worried about me. So individually, I feel great. I don't really care about my community.
We can feel that throughout society.
Oh my gosh. It's rife. And it's a problem because it's like, well, how can you really feel good?
Yeah.
Because many other communities don't do that. You know what I mean? Now, again, this is not me trying to compare because we started at a different footing.
Yes.
But at the same time, we have to call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
And it's a problem when you, as an individual, think, well, I'm cool.
Yeah.
Even if my other group isn't cool. For me personally, I can't fully be cool unless I'm seeing my group also succeed.
Exactly.
So it doesn't mean that I'm feeling dejected and everything. You can still have some level of personal self-esteem, but where are you deriving that from?
Exactly.
That's, I guess, my question. Where are you deriving that from? Is it just solely your individual accomplishments, or are you deriving it from seeing your people advance? So this is where it comes down to high individual self-esteem or low collective group self-esteem, which is redundant because collective and group is the same thing, but you know what I mean.
So I would love to see us come together in this business fashion, right?
Yeah.
And trust each other more, because I feel like we always say support Black business or invest in Black business, but like I feel like what does that actually look like?
Yeah.
What's the intention? Like what are we actually watching where we spend our dollar and stuff like that? So like, for example, one of the alarming things that I see personally, I can go just down the street on 5 and 10 and I'll see our Black hair stores that are run by the Koreans.
So problematic.
Yeah. You want to talk on it?
Yeah. So, you know, the fact that it's run by Koreans goes to show we've normalized it, because it's not just the one. You go throughout Scarborough, any BSW, beauty supply warehouse, is run by Koreans. You know, with the exception of, you know, big up the mom pop, you know, Black owned beauty supply stores, because there's a couple that are popping up, which I think is amazing. But the fact that it's individual, we don't have chains. So we're the chain.
I want to speak on that.
You know what I'm saying? And so, you know, so we'll backpack that, but like, it's challenging because, you know, not just looking at the Koreans, for instance, running our stores, or, you know, in the States, for instance, a lot of, you know, Jewish people have businesses in the ghettos. And I mean, you know, and even many of our respective communities, you know, Chinese people, for instance, have grocery stores in the middle of the ghetto. You know, for instance, look at Malvern, right? There's a Chinese supermarket.
How?
But how?
Yeah,
how? You know what I mean? South Asian and Black. How on the earth do we not have a wide stream, you know, Black supermarket? And even when we do have our West Indian stores, it's run by Chinese Jamaicans or Indo-Caribbean peoples, right? So it's not even us who are owning and running it. We may work in the meat shops. We may work at the counters, but that's a problem. And we have normalized it. Now, this is where I say it's a challenge in the Canadian context, because Black Americans have a different understanding and relationship with race. So everything is rooted in racism, and everything is rooted in racism, but they unfortunately have not had, I guess you could say, a cultural melting pot, or understood a cultural melting pot the same way we, as let's say Caribbean, or even, well, in some cases, continental African people have understood, but Caribbean in particular. So you have some Caribbean people who may try to justify and say, well, there's no problem if a Chinese Jamaicans run in the grocery store, because back in Jamaica, you see that, right? Because Chinese Jamaican, Indo-Jamaican, Afro-Jamaican, we're all Jamaican. But the problem is with that, superficially, it's correct. So they may not see race attached to it. The problem is for one, how we're being treated in those stores. And then for two, who has power? Financial and economic power. And that's the problem, is our people sometimes normalize that, but then we don't realize that even in a country where we represent the majority, we're still the poorest. The Chinese Jamaicans are doing better than us. The Indo-Caribbean peoples or Indo-Jamaican peoples are doing better than us. I'm using Jamaica as a case example, but it's the same thing in Trinidad, same thing in Guyana, same thing in Dominica. And so the problem therefore becomes in Canada is we have to understand that even if we come from a culturally heterogeneous nation, heterogeneous meaning different cultures, but it's a melting pot, so we all come to form one nationality. Is the power evenly distributed? Are we all making sure we all are raising up, or is that one group or a couple of groups are raising up and we're still at the bottom claiming a melting pot? They're saying, yeah, we're claiming a melting pot, except we want to make sure we run all of our businesses. And y'all are still our consumers. But then it goes to my other piece about supporting Black businesses. And this is the challenge that I've said to our peoples is we can't fully get mad at some of us Black people not being able to, not wanting to, but not being able to support Black businesses, because if we are oversaturated and concentrated in certain niches, you're forcing me to go outside of my community. If I, outside of wanting food, a real estate agent, wanting somebody to help me with my aesthetics, so barbering, fashion, maybe videography or photography. If I want a physician, if I want a dentist,
it's a lot harder to find.
It's very much harder to find. I can't name 5. You see what I'm saying? Now you're forcing me to go outside of my community. And part of that goes back to what you and I were talking about earlier. What do we need in our community? Are we teaching our children to suck up things they don't want to do, but unfortunately we need it for our community in order to stabilize it? The European Jewish people and the Chinese people and the South Asians, so the Indian, the Pakistani, the Bengali, whomever peoples, They have established a foundation. They have enough physicians. They have enough lawyers. They have enough pharmacists, as an example.
And they operate in what they need.
They operate in what they need. But guess what? Even if their child, let's say, wants to go off and do whatever they want to do, which it sometimes happens, but most times they just listen to their parents. But we know there's problems with that too. They can say, you know what, fine. You want to go and be a singer? No problem. We have enough physicians already.
True.
You want to go and do this? No problem. We have enough nurses already.
True.
We keep thinking, well, we want to do it and I don't really care about the community. We don't have the luxury of doing that yet. We're still all underrepresented in all sectors, every single sector.
Then it goes back to the individualism.
The individualism, because it's all about, well, this is what I want to pursue.
Yes.
And then you can't, and then basically you can't contradict yourself and say, well, why haven't Black people advanced further when you come with that mentality? How you can talk about, oh, well, it's all about what I want to do, but how come Black people haven't moved forward? The two can't coexist. You have to sacrifice yourself in order to make sure your group advances forward. You know what I mean? Until they're at a position. And again, some would say, well, David, that could take a while. So be it. But it doesn't mean you don't pursue your own thing, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do to create the foundation. You build up people's, and this is what I'm trying to do with the mental health system. There's certain pieces that I'm like, I don't really want to do this part, but I understand I have to do this, right? I have to go about it this route. And, you know, for instance, I love to be a therapist, right? But I know my calling is to help be on the more expansive network of things and help create interventions and programs. But in order to do that, I first have to meet this niche. There's very few Black male therapists. So I got to do I love therapy, don't get me wrong, but I know I could be doing so much more. But my piece is I have to hug it for right now, build up and create some more so that I can help fill that niche so that I can go off and now create more widespread interventions to help our people in that capacity. But you have to make sacrifices. So that's where the predicament or the conundrum of supporting Black businesses comes in, because it's like, well, I can only support Black businesses if I'm hungry or if I need some clothes or if I need somebody to cut my hair or do my hair or maybe an agent. But what if I want somebody to help build on some land that I just purchased? We don't have any real estate developers, right? What if I want somebody who is has a whole real estate space in terms of how different multi-unit properties? I don't know anybody like that. Not me personally, but like, you know what I mean? So that's what I mean in all of that.
So that makes me feel good because the app will have those.
The app will have that. So then you'll be able to help fill that niche. You see what I'm saying? So that long, comprehensive explanation is to say the conundrum of supporting Black businesses, which falls into what I just said earlier.
I actually want to go back even to like the hair point, right? And I do believe in stating the problem and maybe giving a possible solution.
Got it.
So for example, like what I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that I think like with the Koreans, right? They have a certain buying power because I do believe the Koreans in Scarborough and the Koreans down here, they're buying the same materials.
100%.
And I feel like if we can adopt that type of mentality, like, okay, you have a hair store down here, you have a hair store in Scarborough or wherever in North York, we can all buy the same materials and just sell it in our respective areas. What do you think about that?
I agree. And then in terms of the buying source, why are we not using Africa?
It's true.
Do you see what I'm saying?
True.
Koreans are using Korea. The Chinese are using China. Like literally, I remember my wife was trying to start, a wig business, right? For instance, and she wanted to go to Africa, but she at least, maybe it's just where she was looking, wasn't finding, I guess, the right prices and I guess the right vendors that she wanted. She's having Chinese people DM her and hit her up.
Alibaba.
And they're coming with competitive prices. I'm sorry, we have to get over this notion of, well, you have to just support me because I'm Black. Are you competing with other cultures who are also business peoples, right? I want to stick with you. But if you just
hold on, sorry,
go ahead.
Cut you off. But when you say like, are we competing, but should we have the mentality or maybe the thought of, well, they're on year 450 while we're on year 2.
Agreed.
Okay.
So agreed. No, you're right. And thank you for, pausing me. We do need to, of course, have some compassion and understand, yes, we need to support our people just to get started up. But then, and we need to have unconditional support, but at the same time, it has to be some reciprocity.
True.
Unfortunately, some of our people, not all, some of our people lack professionalism. They think, well, you just have to support me because I'm Black. Whether it's a contractor, whether it's a physician, whether it's a real estate agent, whatever it may be, we just have to support me because I'm Black. But you're not doing a good job.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess so you're right. year 1 versus year 450. But guess what? If Italian man is coming and saying, listen, this is what I can do. This is what I can lay out. This is what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to go with the brother or I'm trying to go with the sister. And she's like, well, this is what I can do. I'm like, I'm trying to support you. It's like, yeah, I'm like, come on. And then it's like, and then when you're doing the job and you're doing a haphazard job and I'm like, come on, yo, why you pressuring me? Why you pressuring me?
Yeah.
I'm going to get the job that, like, come on. You see what, and so that's what I mean is in terms of the competition. Yeah, I should by nature want to support my people.
Yes.
And I want to, but at the same time, I also want to get the job done properly.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what it comes down to is I've come across many amazing Black entrepreneurs who are accountants, who are, in the healthcare service, who are great at what they do, not just because they're Black, but they're great at their skill. You see what I'm saying? When I was living in the Yukon, I used to live in the Yukon for 2 years, right? I come across Black pharmacists. He was great at what he did. I had questions about respective ointments and medications. He knew his stuff. He said, David, you need anything, you come and check me and blah, 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 blah. That was my pharmacist because he was great at what he did. Not just because he was Black, that was a bonus.
Yeah.
But he was great at his skill. That's the challenge when it comes to, for instance, some of our people's, trying or wanting us to just support them, but they're not mean as halfway. But to get back to your point in terms of where we do our sources, I agree.
Yeah.
And so why not use our sourcing of Africa or the Caribbean? Not just combine our sources and continue supporting China.
Yeah.
Or continue supporting Korea.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So that's what I would also say to that.
Because, combining our sources, because the first thing that I thought about was the Alibabas. Like, I didn't even know if there's any African like manufacturers.
That's a niche that needs to be created,
explored or created.
There may be. I'm not the most familiar with it. But you're right. The fact that there isn't an Alibaba, well, why isn't there?
Yeah.
Where do they get a lot of the hair? You know what I mean? Yeah. Same thing with India. Like, a lot, or even, some of these sisters be like, oh, I got these Peruvian bundles. I got that Brazilian. I got that Indian. True. Do you hear what you're saying?
Yeah.
You got that Peruvian, Brazilian, Indian. You're going outside of your community to get non-Black people's hair.
Yeah.
When we could do the same thing in Africa.
Yeah.
So I'm not here to say I'm pro or anti. People who know me know what my stance is on that. But I'm saying, okay, if you're going to get your source, at least support your peoples in the interim.
Yeah.
Go that back to the motherland. We were the ones who originated braiding.
Yeah.
So why not just go back to the source? Because where do you think these guys are getting the hair? You know 100%. What I mean? So that's what I would say.
So us living on European foundations,
yes,
right?
In terms of, are you talking about like the country?
The country.
So in Canada specifically.
In Canada.
Got it. Yeah.
Is it possible to go back fully to our roots and live how we're supposed to be living?
No. And I don't think we fully need to. I don't think that needs to be the goal.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? So I guess to answer that, yeah. And I'll allow you to expand and I can expand wherever. Okay. Yeah. So I don't think that needs to be the goal. So, and I'm happy you brought it up because oftentimes this is part of the debate in terms of the Back to Africa movement or the Pan-African movement. And I think the message ends up getting lost in it when at least when I say back to Africa, what I'm saying is not always literally going back to Africa.
Yeah.
It could be.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be. But when I say back to Africa, I mean, goes back to my original point, placing Africa back at the center of our lives. So when we're saying we're going back to Africa, it doesn't mean we go back to, again, and people who are very stereotypical, because I've even talked to some so-called educated people who have very stereotypical understandings of Africa. Well, we're going to go back to loincloths. And this is what some of these so-called people with PhDs have, right? Or will say. And I'm like, that's so ignorant. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
And again, that's typecasting African people. We're not only in the villages.
Exactly.
You see what I mean? So when I'm saying let's go back to Africa, it's going back to the needs of African people and how we understand the world.
That's the big part.
That's the piece. That's it. African people internationally. Yeah. So when I say that, okay, culturally speaking, what does it mean to be an African person? That's a very loaded question because again, we have to remember it's not just West Africa. Yes. It's East Africa. It's Southern Africa, right? Parts of North Africa, with the exception of, let's say Tunisia, Morocco, even though Morocco has some Nubian influence, etc. But my point is understanding culturally who we are. So trying to trace our roots, or if you can't fully trace your roots, okay, how do we as African people, for instance, how do we engage in nutrition? What was our diet? How much of that is applicable to the current day, right? Trying to do that. And anytime, the same thing goes for our respective economics. Well, how did African people understand entrepreneurship? Well, we were, our respective cultures were self-sufficient. To be self-sufficient, you have to be an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Right? So when I say back to Africa, it's understanding what did our people do back in the day?
Yeah.
How much of that is applicable to our current
just
day?
bringing the blueprint here.
That's it.
Okay. I understand.
And so in that same breath, people will say, oh, well, why is that important? Every other group does it.
Yes.
Look at the Chinese.
Yeah, exactly. They bring their blueprints right back here.
They bring the traditions back. Chinese people to this day still practice Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism.
Yeah.
Right? That grounds their philosophies.
Exactly.
Since time of 100, 200 BC.
Excel here.
It allows them to excel here. Since the time of 100, 200 BC.
Yeah.
They've always understood the importance of honoring their elders. 2023, they still practice that. So the Chinese, this new Chinese generation have never forgotten that. They say, okay, I have to do all this. How am I going to honor the elders?
Yes.
Right? They understood the importance of collectivism.
Yeah.
So when they came from China, the goal was to build a new China. It wasn't to individually excel. It was to build a new China. Indians came from India to build a new India. Jamaicans come to build up themselves.
Yes.
Trini people come to build up themselves.
Yeah.
Ghanaians come to build up themselves. Some may try to argue with me. Cool. Show me a little Ghana. Show me a little Jamaica. I can show you many Chinatowns.
Yeah.
I can show you many little Indias.
Yeah.
You can't show me one little Nigeria.
They almost got rid of our little Jamaica in the
Thank you. And
that was like a charity thing. Like, here, guys, shut up.
Thank you. And even little Jamaica, as much as it has so much value to our community, it goes back to our piece in terms of what was the business composition.
Yes.
Aesthetics, food, culture. That was it. We didn't. We. It's not like it was what's called Bathurst Street, where there's a whole concentration of Jewish businesses for food, farm,
everything.
banking, everything.
Yeah.
Us, it was mainly food. You know where we had to go to get our physicians? We had to go up the road on the other side of Eglinton to where all the Jewish people live. Where we had to go for our respective pharmacies. Even in our communities, it wasn't us running the pharmacy stores.
Yeah.
So my point is we. Remind me of the question.
I said, shoot.
Hold on. I was going there.
What did I say? I forgot the last.
Bring back to Africa.
Oh, yes.
There we go.
Yes.
My point is, when I'm saying we want to bring Africa back to us, or in terms of why our history is important, because every other group understands that history was their starting point. So the Holocaust,
keeps us grounded.
It keeps you grounded. The Holocaust was a disruption in European Jews' history, but they always reference the Bible, for instance.
Yeah.
Although there's controversy there, but they reference the Bible.
Yeah.
The Chinese people reference the ancestors. The movie Turning Red, for instance, it's a kid's movie. And the foundation of the movie was honoring the ancestors, right? The same thing for the Indians. They honor their ancestors and they understand the origins of Hinduism and all of that. We as African people have to follow that blueprint, not because we have to mimic other groups. That's literally how you maintain a civilization.
Exactly.
That's how you progress as a people. If you try to neglect your historical roots, where in the earth are you going?
Yeah. Exactly.
Where are you going?
Well, what's the purpose?
What are you rooted in?
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Is so when I'm saying we have to understand our history and we go back to Africa, what I'm saying is we just have to basically take Africa back, instead of it being at the peripheral and meaning at the side, we place it back in the center and say, okay, everything that I do, how am I going to advance our peoples, in whatever respective direction? How are we going to advance us forward? So that's what I mean in terms of, why it's so important for us to know our history and everything and basically take back Africa.
100%. So with this next question, I can open up a super can of worms, but I'm not going to do it because this could be a whole nother episode.
Got it. You got it.
And it's just about our mainstream media, right? And our musics and our entertainment.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily have fully control of it.
We don't have control.
We don't have
Not
control.
even fully. Yeah, no,
we don't have control.
100%. Yeah.
And yet it's perpetuated. Like, for example, our music is perpetuating so much hate, right? And I just feel like, okay, so like
hate, like within the community you're talking about.
Community.
Yeah.
And so, for example, like when I have conversations like these, I think about like we're almost facing two wars at once within ourselves and on the outside.
Yep.
What do you have to say about that?
You're correct. You're correct. But it's understanding, I guess, the origins of our internal wars have to do with the external wars.
Okay.
So the internal wars came thereafter.
Okay.
So you're right. Two are concurrently happening.
Yeah.
And in order to exterminate, even if we exterminate one, the other may still be present. But what we have to understand is one came first. It's not a matter of the chicken or the egg. No, one did come first. White people's tyranny against us started to evoke a lot of harbored resentment, frustration, pain, agony that unfortunately we weren't able to always return back to the oppressor who originated that pain. We displaced it to one another.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening. You're right. So I guess back to your question about the music.
How do we kind of like move on, or how do we get a little bit better? How do we move the needle just a little bit?
I think we have to. It goes back to my piece about systematic. We have to systematically talk about it.
Okay.
And address it.
Okay.
And come up with a resolution. When I say systematically, not off the cuff conversations.
Okay.
We have not, to this day, systematically talked about the effects of enslavement or colonialism.
Yeah, not at all.
Not at all.
But we're seeing it.
But we're seeing it every day. If again, in using European Jews, just a point of reference, just because of their stuff being more mainstream. European Jewish people have systematically had a discussion about the effects of enslavement.
Yes.
Enslavement, the Holocaust.
Yes.
Right? The Germans have had to pay their reparations. Yeah. The Germans have had to do their part. Canada's had to do their part. America's had to do their part. They created movies about it. Any conversation you have with the European Jewish people, they talk about the Holocaust. Again, we know there's a whole bunch of issues even when it comes to the Holocaust, and understand that African people were also in the Holocaust and that it actually wasn't the first Holocaust. The first Holocaust actually happened in Namibia by the Germans in 1904, where they actually tried to obliterate the Hetero and there's another ethnic group they tried to obliterate. First German Holocaust. Notwithstanding that, systematic conversation. When I say systematic, there was a process.
Okay.
And then once we came to that piece of what we expect in terms of resolutions, concurrently, the internal resolutions were also happening. Now, to our peoples, we've faced way more trials and tribulations than European Jewish people, first and foremost. But secondly, in order to understand and rectify some of our issues internally, we have to have a systematic conversation. We don't want to talk about slavery, right? We don't want to talk about colonialism, but we just want to tell white people to stop being mean to us.
Yeah.
It's not going to work like that.
Yeah.
Now we're starting to. I say that we have some brave people in the Canadian context. In the States, they've made progress in doing that, but we can't compare it to the States because remember, they've been in this battle since 1619, right? It's 2023. They have had to persevere
a different type of battle. Yeah.
With us here in Canada, we're a very complex people because the majority of people here are Caribbean.
Yes, exactly.
So we don't originate here.
Yeah.
Our issues originate in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
But then in the Caribbean, it's a majority black country. Yes. So in the States, they're a minority. So with us, we think, well, we're a majority black country. Yeah. We don't have any effects of racism.
Yeah.
That's beg to differ. Yeah. My point is we're gonna have to continue working towards having a more systematic discussion on the effects of enslavement as well as the effects of racism and racist practices in Canada that have detrimented our people here, causing our young people to act out or externalize
certain things,
their distress. So how do we gain back control of our music? And I guess change the content of our music? We first have to change our young people's value systems. We have to change the conditions our young people are in.
Yeah.
Music about violence in the community doesn't pop out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Look at what they're doing in Jamaica. They're they banned dancehall music from the radio.
Oh, really?
I don't know if you heard about. Yeah, wow. They banned it.
Wow.
Now some would say, oh, that's a win. Banning dancehall music doesn't take away violence that's happening.
Yeah, exactly.
They talk about what's happening in their communities.
Yeah.
So in order to really have it being effective, we'll change the conditions. Give more economic opportunities for the young people in Jamaica.
Yeah.
In order for them to not have to resort to violence and other forms of criminal elements. Same thing with us. But we have to understand when it comes back to taking back control of our music, well, it's doing just that.
Yeah.
Don't always blindly sign contracts of these vultures that are really giving you these contracts to exploit you.
Exactly.
We need to, and this is where our black lawyers come in. This is what, because they're the ones who read these contracts.
Yeah.
Where are our black lawyers in the music business?
Exactly.
Right? How many of our young black boys are trying to be rappers in Toronto and have nothing but white lawyers who are not really looking out for their best interests?
Exactly. They don't give a damn.
So you see what I'm saying? So a lot of the internal and external issues comes down to, we have to have systematic explanations and understandings of what happened to us, what's currently happening to us. And we have to have our peoples who are in those industries unite together to start taking back control of those elements. The States, different context, but again, there's a lot of carryover here. Same thing in Jamaica. We don't even control our dancehall music in that widespread regard. You know what I mean? Because if we did, why would Jamaica be as poor as it is now?
Yeah, exactly.
Reggae is one of the number one exports out of Jamaica.
Yeah.
Do we have control over that? Well, no. You see what I'm saying? So that's my thing, is we have to take back control. We just have to do it. So
interesting. So David, when it's all said and done, how do you want to be remembered?
That's a good question. How do I want to be remembered? I guess you could say I want to be remembered as somebody who unequivocally and unapologetically fought for, advocated, and prioritized the needs of African people exclusively. I'm going to say that again. I want to be remembered as somebody who unequivocally and unapologetically advocated and prioritized the needs of African people internationally. Exclusively. You see what I'm saying? And why I want to be remembered as that is, we have very, in my opinion, especially in the Canadian context, very few people who take that position. It's always black people and black people in addition to, black people as well as. No disrespect to indigenous peoples, but they're exclusive. Never heard of indigenous people advocating for anybody else outside of indigenous peoples.
And they should be exclusive.
And they should be, because colonialism was exclusive.
Exactly.
There was indigenous-centered policies to detriment them.
Yeah.
The Chinese people, the same thing. The Indians, the same thing. The Italians, the same thing. Why are we so inclined to include everybody else in our struggle? And I'm like, that's a problem. I'm not saying if somebody else of another group needs help, I'm not going to help them. I've provided services for people cross-culturally.
Yeah.
But guess who my priority is? Black people.
Yeah.
I've never hidden that.
Yeah.
You go on my website, you see it. The pictures of the children that I have on my website are black children.
Yeah.
And I want to remember it as that issues that happen to our people were exclusively against our people.
Exactly.
So the solutions need to be exclusively for our people.
That's a big one right there.
Period.
Yeah. That's
Period.
a big one.
That's it.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
So, and that's where I think, I really want to be remembered for, because even in my thesis, I've met a lot of black people who are apologetic. They are fearful of saying black people, period. It's black people, comma. Why is there a comma? Who are you adding into the mix? Would they reciprocate that?
Yeah.
And my thing is, it's like, we can no longer be fearful. I think there's a time and place. Like if we're talking neighborhoods, for instance, that are culturally heterogeneous, that's different.
Yeah.
We don't have predominantly black or solely black neighborhoods throughout Canada, with the exception of maybe Halifax.
Yeah.
But that's different. But my thing is, it's like, when it comes to whose issues I'm prioritizing, it's the group that I come from and the group who has been the most neglected.
Yeah.
Black people.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to be remembered as.
Okay, amazing. And for the next two questions, we ask the same two questions for everyone on the show.
Yes.
So I want to know, what's the best advice that you received, and what's the worst advice that you received? You don't gotta say any names.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's cool. Okay, the best advice that I had received. Holy.
Or even that you can give.
Yeah, that I can give. Okay. Let me take a minute.
Yeah.
You know what? Okay, I can tell you the worst advice that I've received.
Yes.
It wasn't directly watch my tone or modify my tone, but to basically, in some ways, water down my approach.
Why? I hate that.
Because it was an accommodationist standpoint that they wanted me to take, right? and it wasn't just one person. It was different people saying, "Whoa, Dave, just chill, fam. You know what? Worst advice that I've never taken. Never taken. The worst advice that I've never ever taken. Because I understood there needed to be that passion. The best advice that I would say I have taken, or the best advice that I have received, that I would also emphasize to people is to understand your respective craft, to master your craft. And I think it was Dr. Bobby Wright. He was a clinical psychologist in the States from Chicago. And to study and master the understandings of whomever is in power in order to critique it and create your own systems, theories, whatever it may be. But basically to master your craft and to master the understandings of whatever respective, dominant theory or paradigms that are out there, and especially in my respective field, in order to be able to critique it and create your own. Reason why that has really stuck with me, and I saw it when he was doing a lecture, is because we oftentimes want to jump to the critiquing piece. But the critiques end up being only half correct because you haven't taken the time to actually master what they're trying to talk to you about. All them years you go to school, you should be able to understand in its entirety whatever respective theories, because we know it's all Western-based theories. We know it's white theories, right? On white patients. But what you should be doing is understanding it in order to see all of its pitfalls, because there's so many pitfalls in many of it. When you can see its pitfalls and see the inapplicability to your people, where you're able to critique it, and then you're now able to innovate your own.
Exactly.
Because you can't, again, when in Rome, you have to, in some cases, do as the Romans until you get to a point where you have mastered being like a Roman. You can go back to truly be, well, this is who I actually am. And I can tell you all the issues wrong with your theory because I've studied it. This is what people do when they come to Africa. People come to Africa and they study Africans. They live like Africans, learn the language.
Then they take.
Then they take. That's it. And then they take and then they create their own. That's how people came up with a lot of their things. So that's what I would say is you have to master your craft. So you don't want to be just known as a black videographer. You want to be known as a videographer who so happens to be black.
Actually, that was an argument the other day with the actor
Idris Elba.
And he said, I just want to be known as an actor.
Now, Idris Elba, I think, is also trying to think he's, I guess, above racism now. I think Idris Elba, I think his words itself weren't wrong, but I think the position from which he was coming.
Questionable.
But it's true though. You want to be known at, like, for instance, Denzel Washington, in my opinion, I think a lot of people's opinion, is the greatest actor of all time. I didn't say greatest black actor. He's the greatest actor of all time. You look at his portfolio, you look at his ability to act, to take on these parts, his ability to direct. The man is the most amazing actor of all time. His versatility is unmatched. That is how we also need to be known when it comes to our respective craft. People want to be known for their craft, and the bonus part was, I'm also black. Right? So when people see me, they're like, yo, David is a really good therapist. Like, I've had people cross culture say, like, yo, this guy knows his stuff. This guy's a great orator. This guy's a great writer. This guy is a great teacher, educator, who just so happens to be black. Like, him being black just makes it even more amazing. Because it's an example of black excellence. You know what I mean? It's a cherry on top. That's how we should be doing it. We shouldn't be like, oh, I'm a black teacher. I'm a black social worker. No, you're a social worker. No, you're a doctor. You're a psychiatrist. But in order to do that, you have to master your craft and make it the best that it can be. And then in order to do that, you also have to understand, well, what are the mainstream theories that they're forcing me to learn? Okay, let me learn it, master it, critique it, now create my own.
Exactly, change it up.
That's it. Theory, interventions, whatever it may be. That's what I'm trying to do, is trying to create our own theories, create our own interventions.
The art of war, almost.
Yes, that's it. Very good. And in order to do that, I have to first understand, well, what are the respective paradigms that are the mainstream ways of doing things? Okay, now let me see if I can critique them and create a better method. So then your method ends up being not the black method, but the method. Ben Carson, even though he has a lot of issues, was the first to, I think, separate conjoined twins. It wasn't black conjoined twins. It was just conjoined twins. True. Who was the first person to do open heart surgery? But whatever, I think it was a black physician or for black surgeon to do open heart surgery. It wasn't black open heart surgery. Open heart surgery.
Yes.
They revolutionized the way you do open heart surgeries. We've come up with, one Smith, which was an African young man who was enslaved in Boston, who helped come up with a way of actually engaging in a vaccine method, inoculation. It wasn't black inoculation. It was inoculation that became well known throughout the States of how do we create vaccines against terrible viruses and illnesses. My point is, master your craft, study the mainstream theories in order to critique them, and therefore be able to build and innovate your own. Every single, I guess you could say, amazing inventor has started there.
Okay.
Always started with understanding what is being done, what are the pitfalls of it.
How do I create my own?
Thank you.
Got it. That's
it, man.
So the last question.
Yes.
We like to make predictions on this show. So in 5 years, I'm like, David said he was going to do that. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
5 years. First, I don't know if I'm going to be here in Canada. Yeah, no, I'm probably going to be somewhere in the continent, in the Caribbean. Okay. Yeah. So, but I mean, that's what I'm hoping is in 5 years, what I plan to do, and I'm going to profess it, in the Most High's name. I plan to have either the foundations or at least in the process of creating a mental health system that is African-centered. So in terms of our values, our ideologies, our philosophies, the way we understand mental health and illness, of course, modified with various, understandings of what we're doing currently. Have a mental health or have a African-centered mental health system started either in Canada or in one or various African countries, right? In 5 years. And is that possible in 5 years? Of course, because I'm finished my PhD technically in 3.5. So at least, another like 1.5 years. Yeah. I think I can be able to at least create the foundations for it. And if not a respective separate system, because I think we need a separate system, to influence it in the sense that we have a separate stream even within the Western paradigm. Okay. So if you're a black person, you're an African person, it's not just a specific clinic, specific system. Yes. They say you can either have the Western mainstream system or the African-centered system that has black psychiatrists, black social workers, nurses, nutritionists, pharmacists, respective other traditional healers, African drummers, whatever it may be. We have systemized programs for respective disorders, depression, anxiety, or mood disorders, trauma-related disorders. We have respective preventative medicine, right? So we have a whole system created that I'm hoping not just is here in Canada, but I can have throughout Africa, throughout the Caribbean. So we can start taking back our mental health.
Amazing.
And not just regurgitating, European psychiatry.
Amazing.
So that's what I'm hoping. In 5 years, I'll at least have some of the blueprint for creating that system. That's my goal.
Amazing. And that would be a lifelong journey for you?
That's a lifelong journey, is to create overall a way better healthcare system for our people. But my focus, my expertise is in mental health and illness. I know a bit about, I guess you could say other endocrine system issues like diabetes and hypertension. So cardiovascular stuff. But my focus is mental health and wellness and all, I guess, related comorbidities, trying to improve it so that we no longer have to be normalizing people experiencing depression at high rates. Yeah. It can actually decrease the amount of people struggling with depression, and it gives people a place of where they can go. So that's why I'm really trying to promote this understanding of mental health and illness in a systematic way of not just saying, airy, mental health and wellness is important. No, this is what depression is. Yeah. This is how we treat it. Yeah. This is what anxiety is. Yeah. This is what schizophrenia is. This is how we can treat it. Yeah. And this is how we can try to prevent it. Okay. So, and of course, to do that, you have to tackle racism and battle it. But in order to really, truly battle it, you have to have power. And that is what I'm trying to help our people do, is we can't just be submitting ourselves to being powerless and hoping white people will change their minds. No, I'm trying to create our own system with our own people. Exactly. Because that's power. Yeah. And when you have the best interest in you, that's it. So that's what I'm trying to do in the next 5 years, is create the blueprint for creating that. So even if it's not me per se doing it and I end up doing some other things, I create the blueprint and I'm helping to consult and guide the project. So it becomes not just, again, I'm a Pan-Africanist, right? It's not just in Canada. Doesn't matter where you go, you're in Ghana, you're in Togo, you're in Benin, you're in Somalia. You have a system that dashes away the European psychiatry system, and not fully, but takes some elements and combine it with our traditional understanding, similar to what they're trying to do in South Africa, create our own system.
By us, for us.
Thank you. Period. By us, for us. Mental health system and basically the healthcare system in general. I'm trying to transform it.
Okay, amazing.
Yes,
and before
sir.
you leave, can you let people know where they can find you?
Excellent. So I guess I'll look at this over there. So you can find me on Instagram, Global Mind Emancipation. If you really want me to spell that out, I think that's GLOBALMINDEMANCIPATION. Hey, I was a spelling bee chat back in the day, but Global Mind Emancipation on Instagram. Globalmindemancipation.org is my website. You can follow me on LinkedIn, David Grant. I usually keep my Instagram more up to date. If you want to email me or about anything, it's info@globalmindemancipation.org. Again, you can even contact me for any, mental health related whether it's concerns or initiatives that you want me to be a part of. My work number is 647-794-0966. And I look forward to hearing from anybody who has questions.
Dope. David, I want to thank you for coming on, because even like the later part of the conversation, I have so much more to ask you.
Yes.
So I would love, down the line, if you ever feel like you want to come back and you have a message, you have a word, you're always welcome here.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, because
I have so much.
Just little things that you say, I'm like, I'm sticking on to it, but I don't have the time right now to get into it.
Most definitely.
I would love to get into, especially about the depression stuff.
Yes.
I would love to get into that. And thank you for taking the time to come. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, brother.
Thank you.
Appreciate for having me. Thank you.
Lit.
Everything black on black. If I study that facts on facts.